Chapter 15. I talk with a tempter. Ruritania is not England, or the quarrel between Duke Michael and myself could not have gone on with the extraordinary incidents which marked it, without more public notice being directed to it. Duels were frequent among all the upper classes, and private quarrels between great men kept the old habit of spreading to their friends and dependents. Nevertheless, after the affair which I have just related, such reports began to circulate that I felt it necessary to be on my guard. The death of the gentlemen involved could not be hidden from their relatives. I issued a stern order declaring that duelling had attained unprecedented licence. The Chancellor drew up the document for me, and very well he did it, and forbidding it, save in the gravest cases. I sent a public and stately apology to Michael, and he returned a deferential and courteous reply to me. For our one point of union was, and it underlay all our differences and induced an unwilling harmony between our actions, that we could neither of us afford to throw our cards on the table. He, as well as I, was a play actor, and hating one another, we combined to dupe public opinion. Unfortunately, however, the necessity for concealment involved the necessity of delay. The King might die in his prison, or even be spirited off somewhere else. It could not be helped. For a little while I was compelled to observe a truce, and my only consolation was that Flavia most warmly approved of my edict against duelling, and when I expressed delight at having won her favour, prayed me, if her favour were any motive to me, to prohibit the practice altogether. "Wait till we are married," said I, smiling. Not the least peculiar result of the truce, and of the secrecy which dictated it, was that the town of Zenda became, in the daytime (I would not have trusted far to its protection by night), a sort of neutral zone, where both parties could safely go; and I, riding down one day with Flavia and Sapt, had an encounter with an acquaintance, which presented a ludicrous side, but was at the same time embarrassing. As I rode along, I met a dignified-looking person driving in a two-horsed carriage. He stopped his horses, got out, and approached me, bowing low. I recognised the head of the Strelsau police. "Your Majesty's ordinance as to duelling is receiving our best attention," he assured me. If the best attention involved his presence in Zenda, I determined at once to dispense with it. "Is that what brings you to Zenda, Prefect?" I asked. "Why, no, sire. I am here because I desired to oblige the British Ambassador." "What's the British Ambassador doing dans cette galère?" said I, carelessly. "A young countryman of his, sire, a man of some position, is missing. His friends have not heard from him for 2 months, and there is reason to believe that he was last seen in Zenda." Flavia was paying little attention. I dared not look at Sapt. "What reason?" "A friend of his in Paris, a certain Monsieur Featherly, has given us information which makes it possible that he came here, and the officials of the railway recollect his name on some luggage." "What was his name?" "Rassendyll, sire," he answered, and I saw that the name meant nothing to him. But, glancing at Flavia, he lowered his voice as he went on: "It is thought that he may have followed a lady here. Has your Majesty heard of a certain Madame de Mauban?" "Why, yes," said I, my eye involuntarily travelling towards the castle. "She arrived in Ruritania about the same time as this Rassendyll." I caught the Prefect's glance. He was regarding me with inquiry writ large on his face. "Sapt," said I must speak a word to the Prefect. Will you ride on a few paces with the princess?" And I added to the Prefect: "Come, sir, what do you mean?" He drew close to me, and I bent in the saddle. "If he were in love with the lady," he whispered, "nothing has been heard of him for 2 months." And this time it was the eye of the Prefect which travelled towards the castle. "Yes, the lady is there," I said quietly, But I don't suppose Mr. Rassendyll, is that the name, is... The Duke," he whispered, "does not like rivals, sire." "You're right there," said I, with all sincerity. "But surely you hint at a very grave charge?" He spread his hands out in apology. I whispered in his ear: "This is a grave matter. Go back to Strelsau." "But, sire, if I have a clue here?" "Go back to Strelsau," I repeated. "Tell the Ambassador that you have a clue, but that you must be left alone for a week or two. Meanwhile, I'll charge myself with looking into the matter." "The Ambassador is very pressing, sire." "You must quiet him. Come, sir, you see that if your suspicions are correct, it is an affair in which we must move with caution. We can have no scandal. Mind you return tonight." He promised to obey me, and I rode on to rejoin my companions, a little easier in my mind. Inquiries after me must be stopped at all hazards for a week or two, and this clever official had come surprisingly near the truth. His impression might be useful some day, but if he acted on it now, it might mean the worst to the King. Heartily did I curse George Featherly for not holding his tongue. "Well," asked Flavia, "have you finished your business?" "Most satisfactorily," said I. "Come, shall we turn round? We were almost trenching on my brother's territory." We were, in fact, at the extreme end of the town, just where the hill begins to mount towards the castle. We cast our eyes up, admiring the massive beauty of the old walls, and we saw a cortège winding slowly down the hill. On it came. "Let us go back," said Sapt. "I should like to stay," said Flavia, and I reined my horse beside hers. We could distinguish the approaching party now. There came first two mounted servants in black uniforms, relieved only by a silver badge. These were followed by a car drawn by 4 horses. On it, under a heavy pall, lay a coffin. Behind it rode a man in plain black clothes, carrying his hat in his hand. Sapt uncovered, and we stood waiting, Flavia keeping by me and laying her hand on my arm. "It is one of the gentlemen killed in the quarrel, I expect," she said. I beckoned to a groom. "Ride and ask who they escort," I ordered. He rode up to the servants, and I saw him pass on to the gentleman who rode behind. "It's Rupert of Hentzau," whispered Sapt. Rupert it was, and directly afterward, waving to the procession to stand still, Rupert trotted up to me. He was in a frock coat, tightly buttoned, and trousers. He wore an aspect of sadness, and he bowed with profound respect. Yet suddenly he smiled, and I smiled too, for old Sapt's hand lay in his left breast pocket, and Rupert and I both guessed what lay in the hand inside the pocket. "Your Majesty asks whom we escort," said Rupert. "It is my dear friend Albert of Lauengram." "Sir," said I, "no one regrets the unfortunate affair more than I. My ordinance, which I mean to have obeyed, is witness to it." "Poor fellow!" said Flavia softly, and I saw Rupert's eyes flash at her, whereat I grew red. For if I had my way, Rupert Hentzau should not have defiled her by so much as a glance. Yet he did it, and dared to let admiration be seen in his look. "Your Majesty's words are gracious," he said. "I grieve for my friend. Yet, sire, others must soon lie as he lies now." "It is a thing we all do well to remember, my lord," I rejoined. "Even kings, sire," said Rupert in a moralizing tone, and old Sapt swore softly by my side. "It is true," said I. "How fares my brother, my lord?" "He is better, sire." "I am rejoiced." "He hopes soon to leave for Strelsau, when his health is secured." "He is only convalescent, then?" "There remain one or two small troubles," answered the insolent fellow, in the mildest tone in the world. "Express my earnest hope," said Flavia, "that they may soon cease to trouble him." "Your Royal Highness's wish is humbly my own," said Rupert, with a bold glance that brought a blush to Flavia's cheek. I bowed, and Rupert, bowing lower, backed his horse and signed to his party to proceed. With a sudden impulse, I rode after him. He turned swiftly, fearing that even in the presence of the dead and before a lady's eyes I meant him mischief. "You fought as a brave man the other night," I said. "Come, you are young, sir. If you will deliver your prisoner alive to me, you shall come to no hurt." He looked at me with a mocking smile. But suddenly he rode nearer to me. "I'm unarmed," he said, "and our old Sapt there could pick me off in a minute." "I'm not afraid," said I. "No, curse you!" he answered. "Look here, I made you a proposal from the Duke once." "I'll hear nothing from Black Michael," said I. "Then hear one from me." He lowered his voice to a whisper. "Attack the castle boldly. Let Sapt and Tarlenheim lead." "Go on," said I. "Arrange the time with me." "I have such confidence in you, my lord." "Tut, I'm talking business now. Sapt there and Fritz will fall. Black Michael will fall." "What?" "Black Michael will fall, like the dog he is. The prisoner, as you call him, will go by Jacob's ladder. You knew that. To hell. Two men will be left. I, Rupert Hentzau, and you, the King of Ruritania." He paused, and then in a voice that quivered with eagerness added: "Isn't that a hand to play? A throne and your princess, and for me, say, a competence and your Majesty's gratitude." "Surely," I exclaimed, "while you're above ground, hell wants its master." "Well, think it over," he said. "And look you, it would take more than a scruple or two to keep me from yonder girl." And his evil eye flashed again at her I loved. "Get out of my reach!" said I. And yet in a moment I began to laugh for the very audacity of it. "Would you turn against your master?" I asked. He swore at Michael for being what the offspring of a legal, though morganatic, union should not be called, and said to me in an almost confidential and apparently friendly tone: "He gets in my way, you know. He's a jealous brute. Faith, I nearly stuck a knife into him last night. He came most cursedly mal à propos." My temper was well under control now. I was learning something. "A lady?" I asked negligently. "Ay, and a beauty," he nodded. "But you've seen her." "Ah! Was it at a tea party, when some of your friends got on the wrong side of the table?" "What can you expect of fools like Detchard and de Gautet? I wish I'd been there." "And the Duke interferes?" "Well," said Rupert meditatively, "that's hardly a fair way of putting it, perhaps. I want to interfere." "And she prefers the Duke?" "Ay, the silly creature! Ah, well, you think about my plan." And with a bow he pricked his horse and trotted off after the body of his friend. I went back to Flavia and Sapt, pondering on the strangeness of the man. Wicked men I have known in plenty, but Rupert Hentzau remains unique in my experience, and if there be another anywhere, let him be caught and hanged out of hand. So say I. "He's very handsome, isn't he?" said Flavia. Well, of course, she didn't know him as I did. Yet I was put out, for I thought his bold glances would have made her angry. But my dear Flavia was a woman, and so she was not put out. On the contrary, she thought young Rupert very handsome. Oh, as beyond question the ruffian was. "And how sad he looked at his friend's death," said she. "He'll have better reason to be sad at his own," observed Sapt with a grim smile. As for me, I grew sulky, unreasonable it was perhaps, for what better business had I to look at her with love than had even Rupert's lustful eyes? And sulky I remained, till as evening fell and we rode up to Tarlenheim, Sapt having fallen behind in case anyone should be following us, Flavia, riding close beside me, said softly, with a little half-ashamed laugh: "Unless you smile, Rudolf, I cry. Why are you angry?" "It was something that fellow said to me," said I. But I was smiling as we reached the doors and dismounted. There a servant handed me a note. It was unaddressed. "Is it for me?" I asked. "Yes, sire. A boy brought it." I tore it open. "Johann carries this for me. I warned you once, in the name of God, and if you are a man, rescue me from this den of murderers. A. de M." I handed it to Sapt. But all the tough old soldier said in reply to this piteous appeal was: "Whose fault brought her there?" Nevertheless, not being faultless myself, I took leave to pity Antoinette de Mauban. Chapter 16. A Desperate Plan. As I had ridden publicly in Zenda, and had talked there with Rupert Hentzau, of course all pretence of illness was at an end. I marked the effect on the garrison of Zenda. They ceased to be seen abroad, and any of my men who went near the castle reported that the utmost vigilance prevailed there. Touched as I was by Madame de Mauban's appeal, I seemed as powerless to befriend her as I had proved to help the King. Michael bade me defiance, and although he too had been seen outside the walls, with more disregard for appearance than he had hitherto shown, he did not take the trouble to send any excuse for his failure to wait on the King. Time ran on in inactivity, when every moment was pressing. For not only was I faced with the new danger which the stir about my own disappearance brought on me, but great murmurs had arisen in Strelsau at my continued absence from the city. They had been greater but for the knowledge that Flavia was with me, and for this reason I suffered her to stay, though I hated to have her where danger was, and though every day of our present sweet intercourse strained my endurance almost to breaking. As a final blow, nothing would content my advisers, Strakencz and the Chancellor, who came out from Strelsau to make an urgent representation to me, save that I should appoint a day for the public solemnization of my betrothal, a ceremony which in Ruritania is well nigh as binding and great a thing as the marriage itself. And this, with Flavia sitting by me, I was forced to do, setting a day a fortnight ahead, and appointing the cathedral in Strelsau as the place. And this formal act being published far and wide caused great joy throughout the kingdom, and was the talk of all tongues, so that I reckoned there were but two men who chafed at it. I mean Black Michael and myself, and but one who did not know of it. That one, the man whose name I bore, the King of Ruritania. In truth, I heard something of the way the news was received in the castle, for after an interval of 3 days, the man Johann, greedy for more money, though fearful for his life, again found means to visit us. He had been waiting on the Duke when the tidings came. Black Michael's face had grown blacker still, and he had sworn savagely. Nor was he better pleased when young Rupert took oath that I meant to do as I said, and turning to Madame de Mauban, wished her joy on a rival gone. Michael's hand stole towards his sword, said Johann, but not a bit did Rupert care, for he rallied the Duke on having made a better king than had reigned for years past in Ruritania. And, said he, with a meaning bow to his exasperated master, the devil sends the princess a finer man than heaven had marked out for her, my soul it does. Then Michael harshly bade him hold his tongue and leave them, but Rupert must needs first kiss Madame's hand, which he did as though he loved her, while Michael glared at him. This was the lighter side of the fellow's news, but more serious came behind, and it was plain that if time pressed at Tarlenheim, it pressed none the less fiercely at Zenda, for the King was very sick. Johann had seen him, and he was wasted and hardly able to move. There could be no thought of taking another for him now. So alarmed were they that they had sent for a physician from Strelsau, and the physician, having been introduced into the King's cell, had come forth pale and trembling, and urgently prayed the Duke to let him go back and meddle no more in the affair. But the Duke would not, and held him there a prisoner, telling him his life was safe if the King lived while the Duke desired, and died when the Duke desired, not otherwise; and, persuaded by the physician, they had allowed Madame de Mauban to visit the King, and give him such attendance as his state needed, and as only a woman can give. Yet his life hung in the balance, and I was still strong and whole and free, wherefore great gloom reigned at Zenda, and save when they quarrelled, to which they were very prone, they hardly spoke. But the deeper the depression of the rest, young Rupert went about his Satan's work with a smile in his eye and a song on his lip, and laughed fit to burst, said Johann, because the Duke always set Detchard to guard the King when Madame de Mauban was in the cell, which precaution was indeed not unwise in my careful brother. Thus Johann told his tale and seized his crowns, yet he besought us to allow him to stay with us in Tarlenheim, and not venture his head again in the lion's den. But we had need of him there, and although I refused to constrain him, I prevailed on him, by increased rewards, to go back and carry tidings to Madame de Mauban that I was working for her, and that, if she could, she should speak one word of comfort to the King. For while suspense is bad for the sick, yet despair is worse still, and it might be that the King lay dying of mere hopelessness, for I could learn of no definite disease that afflicted him. "And how do they guard the King now?" I asked, remembering that 2 of the 6 were dead, and Max Holf also. "Detchard and Bersonin watch by night, Rupert Hentzau and de Gautet by day, sir," he answered. "Only 2 at a time?" "Ay, sir, but the others rest in a room just above, and are within sound of a cry or a whistle." "A room just above? I didn't know of that. Is there any communication between it and the room where they watch?" "No, sir. You must go down a few stairs, and through the door by the drawbridge, and so to where the King is lodged." "And that door is locked?" "Only the 4 lords have keys, sir." I drew nearer to him. "And have they the keys of the grating?" I asked in a low whisper. "I think, sir, only Detchard and Rupert." "Where does the Duke lodge?" "In the chateau, on the 1st floor. His apartments are on the right as you go towards the drawbridge." "And Madame de Mauban?" "Just opposite, on the left. But her door is locked after she has entered." "To keep her in?" "Doubtless, sir." "Perhaps for another reason?" "It is possible." "And the Duke, I suppose, has the key?" "Yes, and the drawbridge is drawn back at night, and of that too the Duke holds the key, so that it cannot be run across the moat without application to him." "And where do you sleep?" "In the entrance hall of the chateau, with 5 servants." "Armed?" "They have pikes, sir, but no firearms. The Duke will not trust them with firearms." Then at last I took the matter boldly into my hands. I had failed once at Jacob's Ladder. I should fail again there. I must make the attack from the other side. "I have promised you 20,000 crowns," said I. "You shall have 50,000 if you will do what I ask of you tomorrow night. But first, do those servants know who your prisoner is?" "No, sir. They believe him to be some private enemy of the Duke's." "And they would not doubt that I am the King?" "How should they?" he asked. "Look to this, then. Tomorrow, at 2 in the morning exactly, fling open the front door of the chateau. Don't fail by an instant. Shall you be there, sir? Ask no questions. Do what I tell you. Say the hall is close, or what you will. That's all I ask of you." "And may I escape by the door, sir, when I have opened it?" "Yes, as quick as your legs will carry you. One thing more. Carry this note to Madame. Oh, it's in French, you can't read it. And charge her, for the sake of all our lives, not to fail in what it orders." The man was trembling, but I had to trust to what he had of courage, and to what he had of honesty. I dared not wait, for I feared that the King would die. When the fellow was gone, I called Sapt and Fritz to me, and unfolded the plan that I had formed. Sapt shook his head over it. "Why can't you wait?" he asked. "The King may die." "Michael will be forced to act before that." "Then," said I, "the King may live." "Well, and if he does?" "For a fortnight?" I asked simply. And Sapt bit his moustache. Suddenly Fritz von Tarlenheim laid his hand on my shoulder. "Let us go and make the attempt," said he. "I mean you to. Don't be afraid," said I. "Ay, but you stay here and take care of the princess." A gleam came into old Sapt's eyes. "We should have Michael one way or the other then," he chuckled. "Whereas if you go and are killed with the King, what will become of those of us who are left?" "They will serve Queen Flavia," said I, "and I would to God I could be one of them." A pause followed. Old Sapt broke it by saying sadly, yet with an unmeant drollery that set Fritz and me laughing: "Why didn't old Rudolf the Third marry your great grandmother, was it?" "Come," said I, "it's the King we're thinking about." "It's true," said Fritz. "Moreover," I went on, "I have been an impostor for the profit of another, but I will not be one for my own; and if the King is not alive and on his throne before the day of betrothal comes, I will tell the truth, come what may." "You shall go, lad," said Sapt. Here is the plan I had made. A strong party under Sapt's command was to steal up to the door of the chateau. If discovered prematurely, they were to kill anyone who found them with their swords, for I wanted no noise of firing. If all went well, they would be at the door when Johann opened it. They were to rush in and secure the servants, if their mere presence and the use of the King's name were not enough. At the same moment, and on this hinged the plan, a woman's cry was to ring out loud and shrill from Antoinette de Mauban's chamber. Again and again she was to cry, "Help! Help! Michael, help!" and then to utter the name of young Rupert Hentzau. Then, as we hoped, Michael, in fury, would rush out of his apartments opposite and fall alive into the hands of Sapt. Still the cries would go on. My men would let down the drawbridge, and it would be strange if Rupert, hearing his name thus taken in vain, did not descend from where he slept and seek to cross. De Gautet might or might not come with him. That must be left to chance. And when Rupert set his foot on the drawbridge, there was my part, for I was minded for another swim in the moat, and lest I should grow weary, I had resolved to take with me a small wooden ladder, on which I could rest my arms in the water and my feet when I left it. I would rear it against the wall just by the bridge, and when the bridge was across, I would stealthily creep on to it, and then, if Rupert or de Gautet crossed in safety, it would be my misfortune, not my fault. They dead, 2 men only would remain, and for them we must trust to the confusion we had created and to a sudden rush. We should have the keys of the door that led to the all-important rooms. Perhaps they would rush out. If they stood by their orders, then the King's life hung on the swiftness with which we could force the outer door. And I thanked God that not Rupert Hentzau watched, but Detchard. For though Detchard was a cool man, relentless and no coward, he had neither the dash nor the recklessness of Rupert. Moreover, he, if any one of them, really loved Black Michael, and it might be that he would leave Bersonin to guard the King and rush across the bridge to take part in the affray on the other side. So I planned, desperately, and that our enemy might be the better lulled to security, I gave orders that our residence should be brightly lighted from top to bottom, as though we were engaged in revelry, and so should be kept all night, with music playing and people moving to and fro. Strakencz would be there, and he was to conceal our departure, if he could, from Flavia. And if we came not again by morning, he was to march openly and in force to the castle and demand the person of the King. If Black Michael were not there, as I did not think he would be, the Marshal should take Flavia with him as swiftly as he could to Strelsau, and there proclaim Black Michael's treachery and the probable death of the King, and rally all that there was honest and true round the banner of the princess. And to say truth, this was what I thought most likely to happen, for I had grave doubts whether either the King or Black Michael or I had more than a day to live. Well, if Black Michael died, and if I, the play actor, slew Rupert Hentzau with my own hand and then died myself, it might be that fate would deal as lightly with Ruritania as could be hoped, notwithstanding that she demanded the life of the King. And to her dealing thus with me, I was in no temper to make objection. It was late when we rose from conference, and I betook me to the princess's apartments. She was pensive that evening, yet when I left her she flung her arms about me, and grew for an instant bashfully radiant as she slipped a ring on my finger. I was wearing the King's ring, but I had also on my little finger a plain band of gold, engraved with the motto of our family, Nil quae feci. This I took off and put on her, and signed to her to let me go. And she, understanding, stood away and watched me with dimmed eyes. "Wear that ring, even though you wear another when you are Queen," I said. "Whatever else I wear, this I will wear till I die, and after," said she, as she kissed the ring.